And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Sunday, April 13th, 2025. And it's going to be a rather active pattern. We've had an area of low pressure I was talking about last week that came together over the southeast Bering, Alaska Peninsula and into the Kodiak Island area. And we have kind of two centers as of this Sunday morning, but eventually the main center will take shape here in the Western Gulf, Kodiak Island area, and that feature then will just end up spinning back out here into the Central Gulf through the early week. It means, though, more precipitation being enhanced along a frontal boundary, and along that frontal boundary we have snow, especially intercoastal mountains and even into areas along Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai. We then also have the potential instability for a few thunderstorms, especially the northern and central Gulf on Monday morning. And we also have the threat of low-level wind shear as stronger winds will occur along areas of the Gulf Coast. And then on the backside of the system where there is snow and lower ceilings and visibilities, we find IFR conditions along the southwest coast, the YK deltas, and also up along portions of the North Slope Arctic coast, and then again along the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. For Monday afternoon, we find IFR conditions shrink in coverage, generally MVFR, with lingering areas of IFR along the northeastern Gulf Coast, northern Panhandle, a few pockets, Alaska Range, and on up toward the central Brooks Range North Slope. There still could be isolated, perhaps flash of lightning, rumble, thunder here over the Gulf. And then for Tuesday morning, rather extensive IFR conditions are anticipated along the inner channels and intercoastal mountains of the Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast up toward McCarthy, and then also across much of the interior, North Slope, Brooks Range, middle, lower Yukon, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound to St. Lawrence, down to Nunavik Island, YK deltas. And if that's not enough, we already have hints of another low that'll be coming up out of the North Pacific and spreading more wind and precipitation across the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula as we get into Tuesday afternoon and certainly by Tuesday night. And eventually that moisture will spread further north as we go into Tuesday night and Wednesday. So no sooner do we have the one low in the Gulf kind of weaken and begin to fade away, we have the new system spreading IFR conditions across the eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula starting Tuesday afternoon. And as moisture surges northward on the backside of this, more wind and snow could impact the YK deltas here for midweek. We're also going to have a strong front with gusty winds and more precipitation push up along the Gulf Coast. So areas of the southwest, south central, and along the Gulf Coast Panhandle, extending from Kodiak Island down along the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. We're going to have kind of a repeat of a similar system. The details will work out here coming up in the next day or two, but nevertheless, active weather pattern continues. Now for the passes on Monday, Anativik Pass and Adigan Pass, generally MVFR conditions expected there in the east central Brooks Range. Alaska Range, we could see IFR conditions along Lake Clark and Merrill try to give way to MVFR in the afternoon. Certainly Rainy Pass, IFR becoming MVFR. Windy Pass, generally MVFR conditions, as will Isabel Pass, and as we get further east, Mentasta Pass should generally see VFR conditions on Monday, though south of there, south of the south entrance, Copper River Basin, MVFR. Tanita Pass is looking generally MVFR on Monday, but the areas west of there, we are looking at, or I should say off to the south, IFR becoming MVFR. And then Portage Pass starts out with quite a bit of IFR conditions, especially mid-pass out into Prince William Sound becoming MVFR. And Chilkoot and White should hold on to some IFR conditions there on Monday. So freezing levels at the surface. We do find some cool air out over the Bering. We have the freezing line down to the central Aleutians, crossing down along the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, coming up Matsu Valley, and then across the northeastern Gulf Coast into the northern and intercoastal mountains there, British Columbia. There's no real big bump to the freezing levels aloft. We'll see that tend to happen again as that next system comes up out of the North Pacific later Tuesday and certainly on Wednesday. Potential for icing with areas of moisture, thicker cloud cover where there may be precipitation falling. Above 5,000 feet along the Gulf Coast, especially the outer panhandle here outside the icy strait up toward Yakutat. And also pockets here within the upper Yukon Valley and then also east of Kodiak Island. Then behind me there's the potential for some moderate icing along areas of the western Aleutians out into the southwest Bering Sea. Now, upper level jet stream winds, we have a broad belt of generally west to southwest winds across from the Alaska Peninsula through the lower Gulf, North Pacific, and then up across Haida Gwaii into British Columbia. Winds 90 to locally a little over 100 miles an hour. And then behind me, we find northerly flow coming off the Asian continent toward the western Aleutians, local wind max at 30,000 feet, though this is jet stream level at 105. Now at 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, we have the low circulation here over the Gulf. Pretty broad band of stronger winds, 35 to locally 50 knots, central southern Gulf. We have areas coming inland up into lower Yukon, up above 50 knots, generally southwest flow into the panhandle. And then behind me, we do have a belt of stronger north-northwest winds coming off the Asian Kamchatka region with winds of 50 to 65 knots. And then at lower levels, the circulation in the Gulf, strongest winds, lower southern Gulf, North Pacific up to 45, 50 knots there. But there is the potential for some locally stronger winds and wind shear along trough or weakening frontal boundary in this circulation that's over the Gulf. So keep that in mind for Monday, because this is 3,000 feet and that's not too far above the surface. Further north, we have east-southeast winds off of the Beaufort Sea coast, especially north of Kaktovik, upwards of 40 knots. And then looking to the south, here is the hints of that next system beginning to pull northward. You won't really start to see that, though, until Tuesday. And the threat of turbulence then on Monday is going to be situated mainly along the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, surface to 6,000 feet. There could be some areas of low-level wind shear. Also across Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet, there could be moderate turbulence. And then up across the Alaska Range, along some of the ridge lines, gaps there, we could see moderate turbulence, surface to 12,000 feet for the day Monday.